One Piece Chapter 1001, Scanlation, spoilers, and raws are out. So if you haven't had a chance to see any of those, I would suggest that you go read them and then come back to this video, or you will be getting spoiled. Now, that said, this chapter was a very hype, action packed chapter, no one can deny that. And honestly, this was one of the most easiest chapter to predict because based on what how the chapter ended in chapter 1000, this was probably the most likely outcome. We would be seeing a full-blown fight between the Yonko and the Supernova. And I'm honestly so glad that they did not cut away from this and they gave it the respect it deserves. Like, this is a fight between the old generation and the newer generation. The newer generation is going to succeed and overthrow the old generation. So, this is a very important fight that is going to change the new era. So, we have to see every last part of this fight. And I do not want Oda to ever skip or, off screen any of this fight. And honestly, this whole chapter, even though I'm not too invested into fight chapters, I'm more of a story based reader, I thoroughly enjoyed this chapter. Now, let's start off from the beginning. The chapter starts off where we left, where Luffy landed his Red Rock attack, and Kaido is shocked because for the first time he has been taking damage through Luffy. He even recognizes that Luffy is grown way too fast. Like, what happened just a week ago, a week or two ago, he thoroughly destroyed Luffy. None of his attacks had effect. Now, what happened in such a small amount of time? Big Mom is shocked because she's, of course, not seen Kaido take that damage easily. Both of them, last chapter, were completely underestimating and making fun of Luffy. They were asking him to say what he was talking about being the Pirate King in front of their faces. They were insulting him, they were making fun of him. And to see that Luffy can actually back up his words, he's actually a strong dude, he actually can hurt them. That shocked both Big Mom and Kaido. So slowly but surely, Luffy is getting the recognition and respect from this Yonko. Not yet. So Big Mom and Kaido are still kinda underestimating him. Now, the next part of the story was very interesting because Kaido looks up at Luffy and he thinks to himself, only a few people have ever been able to keep up a fight with him. And he looks at Luffy, and in the back, he sees shadows of people who are able to keep up fight with him. So obviously, this concludes that there are only a very few amount of people that can actually tangle with Kaido. Him being the world's strongest creature and all, it makes sense. Among them was Odin. We already saw the confrontation, and Odin almost did defeat him. Then there's Shanks. Shanks being a Yonko, it's not a big surprise. Big Mom and Shanks are able to put up a fight with Kaido. Then it's Whitebeard. Of course, Whitebeard is also one of the Yonko, and it's not a big surprise. Then Rocks, he was an apprentice to Rocks, it's not a big surprise. Roger, of course, not a big surprise. So it goes to show that the Yonko are a bit more special because you don't see an admiral in there, you don't see any of the navy in there. It could be that he never fought any of them and he doesn't consider them as equals, but it is telling that only pirates are in that list. There was not a single navy member. But moving on from that, it's very interesting to see how they are pictured because at some point it shows that Roger and Kaido had a fight. But when? Was it during the rocks at God Valley? Did they have a fight back then? Because that wouldn't make too much sense because Roger would have been busy fighting rocks. So what time did Kaido and Roger clash? That's very interesting. When did Roger and Whitebeard clash? Obviously, it could have been a clash when they were on the pirate ship for Rocks. It was stated that in the Rocks pirate crew, the crew members were always going at each other, they were trying to kill each other. So it is possible that that's when that happened. Shanks and Kaido, of course, they could have clashed when Kaido was trying to come to Marineford. That's probably when they clashed, or maybe even before that. So this is interesting stuff. It is slowly starting to expand into Kaido's character because So far, Kaido's character is severely lacking compared to the other Yonko. We're already at the third act. We're going to end the third act pretty soon, and we're reaching the climax of Wano. And yet, we don't know anything about Kaido. We're barely aware of any of his personalities, his history, what is his reason to suicide. There are so many mysteries surrounding Kaido. So, at some point, we will be getting a Rocks flashback, hopefully soon, and we want to know more about Kaido, how he faced each of these opponents. Moving on from that, which was a very interesting part for me personally, is we see the supernova interacting with each other. Now, before that, Kaido also gets up and he tries the Raime Hake again, and Luffy dodges it, which is a pretty big deal because he has shown to grow stronger. Back then, he could have dodged Raime Hake, but not completely. But since he was so angry at that time, he could not use Future Sight. He could not use the Observation Haki to dodge it in time. But now, since he's more calm, he's able to dodge it, but not completely. It goes to show that the Future Sight has limitations. Even though you can see the future, even though you can see the attack incoming, you can't always dodge it. You have to have the speed enough to dodge it. That's how Katakuri lost. He could see the attacks coming sometimes, but he couldn't dodge it in time. Snake Man was too fast. Now that was a really interesting part of the fight. And moving from that, Big Mom attacks Luffy with Heavenly Fire. And then Zoro steps in and cuts Prometheus in half. This is a very important deal because Zoro has learned Kinemon's technique. Now this was kind of a given because he was very interested in Kinemon's fire cutting abilities. So at some point I was hoping that he would learn it. Now this makes me more curious because what else has he learned? Because we didn't see him technically learn this ability, but he obviously has learned it. So did he learn any more secret abilities from the other samurai? Because all the other 9 scabbards are specializing in some form of technique. For example, Okiku specializes in snow, Okiku of the lingering snow. Then Ashura focuses on the samurai, the sumo style. So did he spend time learning their techniques? Did he take advice from them? So this is going to be very interesting because now the scabbards are more of a mentor type characters for Zoro, because Zoro needed a very good power up and we got Enma. But along with that, he also has learned techniques, special techniques. So this is very interesting for Zoro, and Zoro fans are rejoicing this chapter because Zoro does a lot more than this. And then we move on to Prometheus shooting a brand new attack, Fire Heavenly Bonbons or something like that. He spits out 3 fireballs at the 3 captains. Of course, the 3 captains are goofing around. Even though Law and Kid try to be, their self, they're trying to be more serious. When Luffy's around, they turn into gags. That is Luffy's power. So he has a way of uniting all 3 of them, and they have a bit of chemistry going on. The 3 captains, these guys are going to be the ones to take over the next generation. So it is kind of interesting to see how these 3 are kind of similar in character, even though they try to deny it. It's interesting to see that they get hit by the attack and Zoro gets pissed off. Then we see another attack from Zoro. Zoro recognizes Killer. So this is kind of interesting for me because Zoro has always been portrayed as this bit of a dunderhead. He has been kind of careless. He doesn't notice things too much. But this time he was able to identify Kamazo as Killer. And this is very interesting because this shows that Zoro is very smart. He is able to put 2 and 2 together. He was able to remember his opponents. So this shows that it's either his observation haki, which is strong, or he's able to put things together. He's not that careless as he was before. Moving on from that, Killer states that if he had his original weapons, he would have been able to kill Zoro. It's kind of debatable, but at the same time, this shows that Killer was definitely nerfed back then. Killer was given the Smile Devil Fruit by Orochi. He was being controlled, he was being tortured, and he was against his will. And his weapons were confiscated. He was using a scythe instead. So There were so many nerfs to Killer back then when he was Kamazo. So it goes to show that Zoro and Killer are somewhere roughly close to each other. Zoro is strong, Killer is also strong, because when Killer and Zoro fought Kaido in this chapter, they were able to damage him slightly. And especially Zoro. Zoro himself says that he has to put out more of Enma's power. Now, Kaido hasn't realized that there's Enma. Enma is right there. So it's going to be interesting to see how Kaido is going to realize that Enma, the sword that gave him the wound, is in Zoro's hands. The weapon that's about to kill him, or that has the potential to kill him, is right there with Zoro. So he hasn't noticed it yet. So pretty soon when Zoro does damage him, or probably even reopen that wound that Kaido or Oden gave him, so that time Kaido is going to realize how threatened he is. Like, he's surrounded by these people that he is underestimating, and they have a lot of tricks under their sleeve that they're going to use and probably try to jump him. Now, moving on from that, we have the next important thing where Kaido tells Big Mom to back off. He wants to test what these guys are capable of. He wants to see their full power. And we see a huge, beautiful panel of Kaido, and he's facing off against Luffy, he's facing off against Law, and Kid. Now, Kid looks amazing. Kid's attack, which is the Punk Rotten, a new version with his robot body and the skull, it looks amazing. But it's kind of awkward in a way, because in the first part of the chapter, he kind of insults Luffy. He was like, how is a punching attack working on Kaido? He's kind of making it look like punching attacks don't work on Kaido, which is obvious. But then he proceeds to use kind of a fist punching attack on Kaido again. So what he's planning, did he master advanced armored haki, or does he have a special version of a hardened haki? What is going on? I don't know, but it's kind of weird that he knows that punching attacks don't work on Kaido, and then he proceeds to use a punching attack. That's kind of a weird situation there. And then Law is also kind of a weird situation, because he just throws rocks. He just pulls rocks on Kaido, and obviously that's not going to do anything. This guy fell from the Sky Island and just woke up unhurt. All he had was a headache. A bunch of rocks falling on him is going to do nothing. So the only person out of the three that actually did do damage, I would say, is Luffy and Gear 4. Gear 4 probably did do more damage, because Gear 3, Gear 2 was Red Rock was able to do a lot of damage, and I suppose this one would have done as well. Now, moving on from that, Big Mom is laughing. She's having her sword out and she's ready to fight. And Kaido transforms into a full-on dragon. Now, this part, the panel, the artwork looks amazing, and it's kind of shocking to see Big Mom and Kaido together, because as gigantic as Big Mom herself is, she looks very small compared to Dragon Kaido. She's not even the size of his face. She's that small, and it goes to show how big Kaido really is. Now, him transforming into his dragon form is kind of weird, because as much as we've seen the dragon form, it is really the most useless form for combat, at least for close range combat, because the very first time he used the dragon form against Luffy, he was pulled out of that form. It was not very effective against Luffy even back then. And then when he was facing the Scabbards, it wasn't effective against the Scabbards either. All of his attacks are able to be countered by the Scabbards. The fire attacks, the lightning attacks can be dodged. So it's really not that useful. All it does is provide a larger canvas for people to attack. So he's just a bigger target right now. So I don't understand his decision behind going into dragon form. Does he have a special attack? Maybe that air slicing thing, the invisible air slashes, that could be his trick, or he's trying to stall. I don't know what is going on, because the dragon form so far has not been that impressive for close range fight, especially against multiple opponents, because they can climb on top of him, they can slash him. He is just a big canvas that they can completely destroy. As for Big Mom, she's there. She's, God knows what she's going to do. She didn't do too much this chapter, but she also is the only Yonko who hasn't taken any damage in the series so far. So the moment Big Mom starts to bleed, the moment she takes damage, that's going to be like a big, big deal because Kaido has already taken damage. That part of Kaido, the mysterious part where he never takes damage, that's already shattered. For Big Mom, she has not yet taken damage in the entire series so far. The only time she took damage was herself. That was the only time she was bleeding. She was the only one who was able to damage herself. So when Luffy is able to punch her and make her bleed, she is going to start to get serious because right now all she is laughing. She's severely underestimating the new generation. She is laughing, she's so careless because she has never been hurt. So this time I am hoping to see someone make Big Mom bleed to make her come to her senses and get serious. So this chapter, all in all, was a full-on action-packed chapter. Almost any fan would agree that this was a hype chapter. There are a lot of things that in this chapter that was very interesting and up for speculation, discussion, especially the part where we see the shadows behind Luffy. Does it have a different meaning? Does it have another, will of D or will of the Force or something like that? Does it have something to do with the will, or does it have something to do with the people actually who fought Kaido? I tend to stick with the later because he was talking about the people who fought him, and then immediately he saw the shadows. So the will part doesn't make too much sense because Rock's and Whitebeard's will don't really exist in Luffy. Even Odin's will is not in Luffy. So it doesn't make too much sense for me, but that's a discussion for a completely different video. This chapter was fire. I love this chapter. I would personally give this chapter an 8.5 to a 9 out of 10. Even though this was not like a full-on story-based chapter or a revelation chapter or something like that that I personally enjoy, this was a monumental chapter on its own because it's the new generation versus the old generation. The new generation are slowly starting to show their power to the old generation, and they're going to show their worth. And the old generation have to either step down voluntarily or they're going to be taken down because that's the natural order of the world. The old gets replaced by the new, whether they like it or not. So this is a very monumental thing, and it's going to shift the whole era in One Piece. And I'm very interested to see how that goes on from here. Now, how the next chapter goes, we will make a whole new prediction video based on all the events. We can consider what this going on. We can make a discussion on what is going to happen in the next chapter. That's probably going to be in another video. Now, it is kind of disappointing a little bit because the next chapter comes out a week after the next week because we have a break next week. That's kind of disappointing, but at the same time, Oda needs his rest. So I will catch you guys on another video. If you have anything to comment about, please comment below. I will get to it when I can. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll catch you later. Bye.